and welcome to Friends Church Weekly Sermon Podcast. Our mission is to become a community of authentic Christ followers compelled to change the world. For more information about services and our community, go to friends.church/Eastvale. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, church. Good to see you today. Hearty hello and happy Thanksgiving week. If you are new, my name is Aaron. I have the joy of serving as the lead pastor of our church. Hey, I have a question for you as you guys think about the holidays, and that is, what have been your favorite jobs over the year? Over the last couple of years, anyway. If you have changed jobs over the last several years, what have been the best jobs you've done? What have been the worst jobs you've done? For me, my favorite job of all time, anyway, was I was working on a golf course, and I cooked burgers at a little golf course, little thing. And after the day was done, I got to play free golf at a country club. That was a pretty good gig, you know. Worst job of all time was same summer. I worked because I had to work two jobs. I cleaned toilets at a summer camp. Enough said about that. All right. That's it, right? So wasn't a great job. What have been the best jobs you've had maybe the last couple of years or the worst jobs? And I have another question for you. When you started those jobs, and whether it was verbally or written down, did you know in the job description that it was going to be a good job? Or did you know that it was going to be kind of a hard job? See, a good job description does three things. It tells us what we'll be doing day to day. It tells us what success looks like when we do the job. It tells us why the job is important to the company and to the organization. And I have the joy every so often to write up a job description for staffing, and I find it really difficult to do. Writing good job descriptions is really challenging because you try to take the tasks of the day and summarize it, but you don't want to just put down tasks because you're inviting somebody into a bigger story. You're trying to get them to do something that's more than just themselves, right? And that's exactly what Jesus does for us in the passage we're going to look at today. In Matthew chapter 5, if you have your Bibles with us, turn there, and Jesus gives us our job description. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at the Beatitudes, these descriptions of what it means to be a disciple in Jesus' kingdom. And we finished up the last beatitude last week as we talked about blessed are those who are persecuted, meaning that sometimes in the Christian faith, you're going to proclaim Jesus, you're going to live for Jesus, and the word persecution, it means to be pressed upon. People are going to try to press you out of the picture. And so now after you wrapped up those beatitudes, he now tells us our job description. And it's 2 lines. It's very simple. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, he says, you are the salt of the earth. And then in chapter 5:14, he says, you are the light of the world. That's our job description. You are the salt of the earth, and you are the light to the world. Guys in the back, can we bring up that verse? We have that? I want you to ask yourself, you're the salt of the earth, you're the light of the world. But what does Jesus mean by those metaphors? What does he mean by being salt and light? Now, if you have been around the Christian faith for a while, maybe you've heard a sermon about this topic before and you have some idea, but maybe you've kind of forgotten, because in my life, every 6 months or so, I pull out my own job description from my Google Drive and I read it. And you know what I find? I find that I've drifted from my job. I find that I'm starting to chase things that don't really matter. I've started to add things. I've forgotten things from my job description that are essential, and I read it again to reorient myself back to what the essence of what it means for me to lead our church, and it really helps me. And I think sometimes as Christians, we begin to drift away from what Jesus has called us to. We begin to chase things that actually don't really matter, that are not on the job description. And I also think we don't want to admit how much our digital spaces that we go onto are shaping our worldview and our beliefs and our attitudes towards other people and towards Jesus and the church and the world. And so we can begin to get these ideas about God that just aren't grounded in what Jesus wants us to be about. So why and what does Jesus mean by these 2 metaphors? You are the salt of the earth. You are the light to the world as the essence of our job description. Because we want to make sure we are hitting the mark as we close this series up on the Beatitudes. And what a great series it's been. God has worked in so many people's lives. Somebody told me last week that they're going to go through the whole study again after we're done. And that's so cool. I love the hunger for God right now in our church. And we need to just keep pressing into that. I don't want us to lose that. As we go into the Advent season after next week, we're going to hear and revisit some stories we've heard a lot. Joseph and Mary and Jesus and all the things, right? And even during a season where we've heard the stories starting next week, I want us to press into just more hunger for God. That's what God would want. But let's look at our passage today, Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. What does Jesus mean by the essence of our job description being salt and light? He once again begins, he says, you are the salt of the earth. What does Jesus mean by our job description? Well, point number one today is this. Our job as salt is to make the world thirst for Jesus and then to preserve the world from the decay of sin with the gospel. Our job is to preserve the world from the decay of sin with the gospel and to make the world thirsty for Jesus. You and I, as followers of Jesus, are salt, and we are to help people become hungry for Jesus, and then to preserve the world from the decay of sin. Let me break this down. In the ancient world, salt was a very valuable commodity. They'd actually pay soldiers with salt. That's where we get the phrase, he's not worth a salt, right, or a lick of salt. That's where that phrase comes from. And the word salary and the word salt are from the same Latin word. It was a very valuable thing in the ancient world. But the primary way that salt was used was as to put on food for flavor and as preservation for food that they caught, fish and meat. Now, I don't think that Jesus is saying that our presence makes the world more flavorful as if your creative endeavors made the world better. I do think that is important. We should all strive to make the world better by our work and our creative endeavors. But I think a better interpretation of what it means to be flavor is that just as salt makes something thirsty, like the Chick-fil-A fries I had last night, so we are to make the world thirsty for Jesus. Now, let me use another food analogy. Back in the day, we used to play really crazy youth group games. They don't do that anymore because I guess it's not allowed to anymore. I don't know, whatever. But different subject. But back in the day, we used to do a game where we would give 6 saltine crackers to a student to eat in 60 seconds. Remember this, Chris, back in the day? He probably did it. He was back in the so without any water at all, okay? And so, Chris, are you volunteering? Is that what I'm hearing? No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that today. But it was so fun to watch someone try to swallow and get these 6 crackers down without any water at all. And really what Jesus is saying is that we are to be the saltine cracker of the world. We are to actually, as we go into the world, make the world thirst for Jesus. Like, I want what you have. There's something about what you have. Now, I was at Chick-fil-A last night, and my son and I were talking about how every worker always says at the end, it's my pleasure when they serve you. It's my pleasure. I said, Cole, do you think they're taught how to do that? Like they're trained to do that? He's like, no. That's just how they are. And I bless his innocence. I didn't want to break his heart. I wasn't like, we'll leave it. He'll discover one day. But aren't all of us supposed to bring a certain saltiness to the world by how we are? That people would say, there's something about them, and it's not fake, it's real. It's not just trained in HR, it's genuine. It comes out of who they are. And people are so thirsty in our world today. It is a human condition. God made our hearts for eternity. He made your heart to long for truth and for beauty and to be right with God. He made your heart to know God and to be in intimacy with God. One of the great theologians of the Christian church, Augustine, he said this, our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. Jesus was speaking to a woman one time in John, and she was in an adulterous affair, and she was searching for soul satisfaction. And Jesus said to her that nothing that she could find in any human relationship would ever satisfy her, but he had spiritual water that would quench her spiritual thirst. And I wonder if anybody here today, just among us this morning, is hungering and thirsting for God, and you're restless. And that restlessness can only be found in Jesus. You can only find a peace, that rest in him. And you can only find soul satisfaction in Jesus. I know that from my own personal testimony. I can't tell it today, but man, my heart before I was a Christian was searching and searching, and I found Christ, and he satisfied me. And so as salt, we are to make the world thirsty for Jesus, but as salt, we are to also preserve the world. Salt was a preservative in that day and age. They didn't have refrigeration. They didn't have Frigidaire and Sears, refrigerators to hold the meat that's in your garages, right? I know a lot of us have freezers in the garage and got all kinds of goodies in there. They didn't have that back in the day. They would catch fish. Remember, where is Jesus teaching? What's the location? Anybody? He's in the Sea of Galilee, right? Wake up a little bit. He's in the Sea of Galilee. And who's in front of him? Hundreds of disciples. What do those disciples do for work? They fish. Every day they fish. And the Mediterranean sun would come out and it would heat up the meat and it would go rotten. They'd have bacteria in it. And so they couldn't get it to the marketplace in time. So in order to preserve the meat from bacteria, they would put salt on it so they could get it to the marketplace and sell it and make some money and probably enjoy the fish tacos later on as well for themselves, right? And just like the salt that's preserved the meat from decay, so you and I, as followers of Jesus, are to help preserve people from the decay of sin with the message of Jesus. Now, we're all going to go places this week, whether it's down the street in Corona or it's at Sizzler in Eastvale. I love that place. Or you're going to actually go, somewhere else, travel. I'm going to Vegas this week, guys. My parents live in Vegas now, in Henderson, so we're going out to Henderson. And my mom's going to make an amazing dinner, right? And I had a counseling appointment some time ago with a young man. He came to me. He wanted to talk about his family because they had broken up. People did not want to get together anymore. They didn't want to travel. They didn't want to go see each other. The long trips were no longer worth it, he said. And we started to explore why, because it wasn't always that way. I asked him, was it a political disagreement? That happens a lot in families now. No. Was it marriages? Did someone get married and now the in-laws, you know how that happens? You start going, peeling off? No. Did somebody say something? No. What ended up happening was his grandma died a year earlier. And after grandma died, no one saw value in making the trip. No one thought it was worth the hassle to get together anymore. The grandma was the glue that preserved the family. And only because she was alive did everyone make the trip. I'm sure some of you have people like that in your families where, they preserve the family. And maybe that's you in this room, where it's somebody who doesn't just cook a meal, but they preserve the unity of the family. And Jesus has given that same identity and role to each follower of Jesus. Your job in the world, the job of the church, is to preserve people from the decay and rot of sin with the message of Jesus. You're to go out and help people avoid decisions that will later cause them great pain because of the rot of sin. And we're to do that with and through the work of Jesus and the gospel. We might ask ourselves, well, how do I do that? Right? How do I actually make people thirst for Jesus? How do I preserve them from sin? Well, it first begins with actually living out the Beatitudes. So the last few weeks we've been looking at these Beatitudes. It begins by us actually living it out. Remember, these are the 10 ones we found, right? Or the 9. We live as poor people in spirit. We recognize that we don't have anything apart from God. That's what it means to be poor in spirit. We mourn our sin, we turn from it, and the promise is that God will comfort us when we do. We are people who are meek and humble, who hunger and thirst for righteousness, who show mercy to people, who have selfish ambition and are pure in purpose. We bring peace and resolve conflicts. And as we live this out, the world notices, hey, something's different about you. The way that you handle life, the way you show mercy, the way that you're humble. Remember the meekness one? The way that you let God guide your life like a horse being guided by a rider. There's something about you that I want to know about, something different about you. That's what it means to make the world thirst and hunger for him and to preserve the world. And then as we live this out, people want to know. But then we have to actually invite them to the message of Jesus. And I want to remind us today of what that core message is, what the gospel is. On the screen, if we can bring up the first picture, is a picture that, no, not that one, the mouse, guys. There we go. That's fun, isn't it? We can act like we're in kids ministry this morning for a little bit. I did not draw this. One of my old friends did. I asked her to do it because she was an artist. And as you can see, there's like nothing, it's perfect. There's no lines outside of the mouse, right? And this is kind of how I used to see Christianity before I was a Christian. I used to think that for God to accept me, I had to have everything together. And some of you have seen this illustration before, but I think it's just a powerful reminder, especially if you've never seen it before. Let's go to the next slide. I used to think that for God to love me, I had to have it all together. That's what religion was for me. And it is for so many people. I have to do for God to love me and accept me. Maybe that's how you see God. That's all about performance and having it all together and kind of hiding the bad stuff and letting God see the good stuff. But the reality of my life and the reality of all of our life is this right here. Especially at 5 o'clock in the 91, okay? And when those guys with the Priuses, oh my gosh, they are the worst. I drive a Prius, in case you don't know. Right? On the 91, these are our thoughts. These are my, and don't think for a second like, oh man, I'm not that. No, every person is like that. Let's not play church today, y'all. Let's be real. These are your thoughts. These are your attitudes. And man, it's messed up. And no amount of cleaning it up can put it all back together. You can't put it all back into the mount, right? What do we do? That is the question of faith and religion. What do I do with my brokenness? Our world says, oh, it's just broken, so you know what? Everything can go. That's what postmodernism is. Postmodernism is, it's all junk, just accept it as it is. But the reality of the gospel, the good news of the gospel is the next slide over. It's this, that God loves you. That's the message of Jesus. That in the midst of brokenness, God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. You know what everlasting life is? When we die, there is an eternity ahead of you. We have 80 years here, and then we die. And there is an eternity ahead, a never-ending time span. Having eternal life is you have life in that eternity. That's what eternal life is. When you place your faith in Jesus, you get life in eternity. And it happens because of the next slide, because of the cross. It happens because Jesus paid for our sin on the cross. That's what he did. This is what people who are baptized today are proclaiming they believe in. This is why baptism is so important. They are publicly saying, I believe in this. I'm putting my hope in this, my trust in this, and that's the message of Jesus. And if you haven't believed this yet, if you're here in this room today, if you're seeking Jesus, can I just ask you, do you know what's keeping you from believing? Do you know what's keeping you from believing in Jesus? Can you identify the stuff, the obstacles that's not allowing you to draw near to Jesus? Would you take some time to figure that out and go on a journey with us here at Friends to figure it out over the next several weeks? And for those who you do believe in this, that Jesus is the Savior, he calls us to go into our local community, into our cities, to help preserve it and by making it a better place. This past week, we got to graduate 10 young men from our ministry, Only the Strong, which is a men's mentoring program for young men who don't have fathers. Let's go back to that picture of Randy and those guys there. There we go. We were in the tower room yesterday. These are two of the guys. It was awesome. There were 25 families that showed up to celebrate these guys. Man, that is salt and light in our culture, right? Isn't that amazing? Let's give it up. So let me ask you this. Are you aware that that's who you are? That's who God says you are. You are salt. That every room you walk into, you might actually cause someone to hunger and thirst for Jesus. Every person you're with, every time you check out at the barista, to the grocery store, to when you go to work, that your presence might actually make someone go, I want that. There's something I want to know more about that. A small way that we can do that here every single Sunday is that as a community, we should never lose our personal warmth as a church. We want to be high touch for every person that comes in this space. If you're new, join us in that cause. We want to have a church culture that doesn't let people just walk out. Man, don't just do service here, come in and walk out. It's not the way church is supposed to be. Church is a community. I know it takes time. I know it takes work. And if you have high relational equity here because you've been here 1, 2, or 3 years, it's your job to break the ice. Don't let people walk out of here going, oh, I'm an insider, they're an outsider, I don't know who they are, it's their job. No, it's not. The gospel says Jesus came to us, we go to people. So let's have high touch. Believers should go into politics. Believers should go into Hollywood and write great scripts. You've been so affected by the Chosen TV show. People should go and do that. If you're a young person, get a vision for that. People should go into the music industry to be salt and light. I'm praying that Taylor Swift would come to know Jesus because a Christian was salt and got around her. And one day she could become a worship leader. Wouldn't that be cool? Some of you don't even believe that's even possible. I believe it's possible because of the power of salt and light. Get into the public schools. Go to the Rotary Club. Get involved. Some of us do. I love that. Coach a team. Transform your neighborhood. Don't go away from your neighborhood. Go into it because you and I are supposed to be a transforming agent. Salt and light. Now, will there be pushback? Absolutely, there'll be pushback. Jesus, a verse earlier, tells us what? Again, you might be persecuted. Persecution means, again, that you're pressed against, that people don't want to hear it. Sometimes people do not want to hear the message of Jesus. Now, frankly, I don't know how anybody doesn't want to hear about that mouse illustration. I've never met anybody go, that's junk. People's hearts melt when they hear the gospel clearly. I believe it. Do you? Be salt, be light. What I find interesting, though, is that in the Greek, the word you is individual. It's not y'all are salt, it's your salt, and your salt, and your salt. And I have a salt shaker here. And, I can't even get one piece of salt out of here. Some of us are going to put a bunch of salt on food this week. But I got one little grain of salt. And you go, how can I be that that impactful as one grain of salt? Men and women, it's not about the power that you have. It's about the power of the gospel that's in you. And so because of what's in you, because of what Jesus is doing in you, you can go into somewhere and you can make it better. But having a front row, what saddens me, I think, though, is that many believers see Jesus is called to be salt and light as a burden rather than a privilege. But having a front row seat when a person's heart gets transformed is what life in all of its fullness in the kingdom of God is all about. It's a wonderful thing to watch someone's life be touched. So you are salt. Preserve it with the gospel and make people hunger and thirst. And then we're called to be light. He says, make your light shine. Verse 14, make your light shine. What does Jesus say our essential job is? Our job is to illuminate the way so others can come home to Jesus. And if you are not a Christian here today, come home to God. Just come home to him. The purpose of light is to illuminate something. So salt preserves and makes people thirsty, and light illuminates the way. When Jesus said, you are the light, once again, the you is singular in the Greek. You are the light, you are the light, you are the light. This was a spectacular phrase. Because in that day and age, there were famous rabbis who, very few of them, who were so well known that they called themselves light of the world. Like a few elite rabbis. They say, oh, that's the light of the world. He's the light of the world. And Jesus looks out at a crowd of fishermen, a crowd of people who are burdened with doubt, who can't pay the bills. The checkbook doesn't balance if you still balance the checkbook, right? They have issues with their bosses. They got issues with their marriages and kids. And God looks out at them and he says, you are the light to the world. Every one of you is the light to the world. Now, what does that tell us about Jesus? It tells us that Jesus wants to include every person in his mission. That he's like, hey, come to the table. I got a purpose for you. I got a plan for you. And God does. You are the light to the world. But make no mistake, you are not the source of the light. Jesus said in John 8:12, I am the light of the world. Jesus is the source. And like the moon that reflects the sun, we shine because he shines in us so others can find their way home. In the ancient world, sailors would navigate because of the stars. They didn't have GPS units. And so when the ocean was pitch black at nighttime and they couldn't figure out where to go, they would look into the sky and they would see the North Star. And they would see constellations that they understood and knew, and they knew how to get home because of the stars in the sky. Otherwise, they would become adrift. There are people in your life that are adrift. Are you adrift? Do you know your way home? It's just kind of all over. It's a mess. Jesus says, you're the light of the world. Your call, your identity in the Christian faith, your job is to point people who are adrift in the world back home to him. Paul says in Philippians chapter 2, in a wicked world, you will shine like the stars in the sky. I love that verse. I know friends who have that tattooed on them. But maybe you're struggling and you hear this and you think, okay, well, I hear what you're saying here, but I don't want to push my faith on anybody. I don't want to force my faith on anybody in the world. Because there is a rule in our culture, in our society, and it says that the secular and the sacred are always to remain separate. We know this real well. We feel it every time we're at work and in spaces we want to talk about Jesus. Our secular culture and our sacred culture are supposed to remain separate. And we say religion is private, you keep it where it's supposed to be, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about? Okay? And we feel that every time we talk about our faith. You're not afraid of being rejected by a person. You're afraid of breaking a cultural rule. That's what you feel when you think about bringing your faith up with your non-Christian friends or in the workplace. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm breaking the cultural rule. Is that rule going to go away anytime soon? No. It's going to get wider and wider. It's going to get the church is just going to get more and more isolated. So what do? Well, we learn to go around the rule wisely. We go around the rule wisely. So what do? For people to be interested in Jesus, this is so simple but profound. We have to be interested in them first. For people to be interested in Jesus, we have to be interested in them. I know it's so simple. It's like, okay, duh. But this is so for people to go, I want to know more about Jesus, we got to show interest in them. Jesus said in John or Luke 15 that a shepherd would leave his 100 sheep if one got lost. And so that's our model. We go after the one who's lost. So I want to ask you if you would make a vow right now in your heart that if an unsaved person ever asks you out to go do something, that's not sinful, by the way, whoever asks you to go do something, that you'll say yes, that you will change your schedule and reorient your day. Say, I want to be interested in them. Yes, I will do that. God, if any unsaved person says, hey, let's go hang out, let's go grab some time, you say, oh, sure, I'll change my schedule if I'm able to, right? That's our model. But what I have found is that most non-Christians don't want to invite Christians out to do anything. Most non-Christians think that we are so boring and that we will judge them for what they're going to invite us to. And you know what? We are so boring sometimes. Like that, we deserve that. And you know what? They have probably been judged by us for inviting us into their things. And so they don't invite us. So what do? It sounds sad, but I've learned I have to invite myself in. Like, I have to invite myself into their life. I gotta push my way in. And this is where most of us stall in our witness. You say, we have accepted the back seat of the cultural station wagon instead of asking to sit in the passenger seat next to somebody who doesn't know Jesus, who's open. So invite yourself in. When someone says, I'm in a band and I play in Ontario on Friday night, you say, how can I get tickets and go listen to you play, right? When someone says, hey, we're going to go watch Centennial beat Mater Dei by 1 point, that was an awesome game. Like, I can't get tickets, it's sold out, but why don't we go get some Buffalo Wild Wings afterwards? If someone says, hey, I want to go golf Friday, I'm going to go golf Friday, say, do you need a fourth? I'll join. You naturally invite yourself into their world. That's what Becky did. Becky was an accountant, 60 years old, retired, helped start our church 3.5 years ago. And she loved Kid Rock. Okay. Like, dude, she did. Come on, you know Becky. Don't get me started on Becky. So Becky was in Chino walking around, not like walking around, she was at the grocery store walking around. And all the retirees were like, I understand that, right? She was at Stater Brothers shopping. She saw a woman with a Kid Rock t-shirt on. She stopped and said, hey, I like your t-shirt. Turns out she was new to the area. Invited her for a walk. She didn't know anybody at all. They went to Ayala Park in Chino, went for a walk, started talking about Jesus. That's how it started. Not a sermon, a t-shirt, an open door, and some light came out, and some Kid Rock t-shirt. Now, perhaps you're thinking to yourself as well, you know, I hear this, Aaron, but I don't want to jump into the world because I don't want the world to influence my kids. and I totally hear this. This is a concern that, who has this concern? I have this concern. The reality is, as parents, Jesus is not teaching us to take our kids and throw them into the world unprotected. Our job is to protect their hearts, keep out the bad, allow in the good, but we are not to just raise them in a bunker either. We are called to be salt and light, to engage, not escape, and so we live in a tension, and we model for our kids how to live in that tension well. Reminds me of a story. When my daughter was 5 or 6, we were throwing a big pool party at my condo complex's pool. It was like the end of the year pool party. And there were a bunch of people there, and we were there, and we were there with another church family. My daughter and I were in the pool, and she gave me a pink flamingo to wear, okay? Because that's what you do when you have a 5-year-old daughter. You wear the pink flamingo. You know what I'm talking about? I guess I'm the only one that wears the pink flamingo as a dad. So I'm in the pool, and there's a group of really cool guys who don't know Jesus in the middle of the pool. And one guy named is Brett. And they got their aviators on, and they're just max cool, and they're chilling. They got their drinks, and it's not water. And I get a look over by Brett, this guy I know, and he waves me over to come over and talk to him. So I go over to Brett, and I'm wearing my pink flamingo, okay? And I walk over with my dad energy, and there's this guy named Mario, and Mario's like 6'2", ripped, like big guy. And I hear Brett tell Mario, hey, this is the guy who throws all of the neighborhood block parties, because I used to throw block parties in my neighborhood like a couple times a year. And Mario, he just scans me, you know what I'm saying? And I know exactly what he's thinking. Like, this is the best we got. You know, like, this is the guy we're throwing to the front lines for us. Like, really? And I know exactly what he's thinking. So I walk up to him. I'm like, hey, how you doing? He daps me up. And then he says to me, yo, where you been? I've been here 17 years. We've never met. Let's go party. And I'm like, whoa, dude, okay, sure. I have a 5-year-old, and the only kind of partying I do is go to birthdays where we play Nintendo Wii. You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean? But I can feel the tension of the conversation. But I stood there. I was trying to connect. I was trying to understand who they were. All the while, my family, my kids are on the side with the other church family, and I'm trying to be present, and I can feel the tension, and I understand the tension. And that's what we live in. But here's a truth that Jesus has put so deeply in me that it motivated us to start this church, which is that Jesus did not call us to comfort. He called us to people. He called us to people like you and I. And we were once that. And then we were found. And now we're here. He's called us not to comfort, but to people. You cannot stay in your comfort zone and expect to experience the kind of spiritual adventure God has in mind for you. You have to leave the zone of the unknown so that you can enter into the zone of the miraculous, where you start to see people transformed by coming to encounter the gospel, because we are salt and light. Yes, it's awkward. Yes, it's messy. Yes, there is tension. But people cannot find their way home unless we shine. And so Jesus then gives us one warning in this passage. Y'all with me? He says in the passage, but if the salt loses its saltiness, it's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out underfoot. And again, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. What does Jesus say could happen if we neglect our job description? He says that when salt will lose its saltiness, and our light will become hidden. Jesus gives us a principle that can change your life and can change somebody else's, and it's this: salt remains effective only if it remains distinct, and light remains effective only if it stays visible. Otherwise, it loses its effectiveness. In that day and age, when they had salt to preserve meat, other ingredients could be added in, and if too many elements were added, it would lose its preservative power, and people would take it and they would throw it out on the road, and people would walk on it, on the street. And what Jesus is saying is that when our lives get diluted with compromise or distraction, or too many things in our life that are just dividing our attention, or double living, our own saltiness and our own influence fades in people's lives. The salt is no longer salty. A lamp that's lit but shoved in a closet cannot light a room, Jesus says. So think about a salesman trying to sell an iron, which I needed very badly. And while wearing a completely wrinkled shirt, you wouldn't believe in the product because it would contradict the messenger. And the same is true with us. We cannot talk about Jesus if people can't see Jesus in us. Whether or not because we're not around anybody who doesn't know Jesus, or because we don't ever talk about Jesus, or we have compromised our faith and we've diluted it with different things. A flashlight turned on, I'm going to go blind. Does no good, does it? A flashlight in a bright room has no effect. The light has to shine in a place that it can actually make an impact. And so is there something in your life that might be diluting your saltiness? Is there a struggle that might be diluting your saltiness? What do you need today to surrender to Jesus so that your salt can remain salty? Is it fear or apathy? Is it being overwhelmed or divided? Maybe you just need a plan. Here's the plan. Just find your one. The one person doesn't know Jesus. Leave the 99 for the one. Who's the one? Who's the one person you can invite to Christmas? Who's the one person in 2026 that you can reach with the gospel? Just choose one. And maybe you feel like you've already lost your saltiness. Maybe you feel like you've compromised. And maybe you feel like you aren't fit for the job. I want to remind us today that God has not fired you from the job and that you're not unfit. God can and use our own failures to help us have a witness for him. That's what Jesus is set apart from the rest of the religious figures in the world. When we mess up, we don't cover it up, we come clean, we return to the Beatitudes, we confess our sin, and then Jesus comforts us with the gospel. So hear me out on this. Jesus can restore your saltiness today. He can uncover your light. He can make your saltiness salt again. Salt must stay salty, light must stay visible, and I believe that Jesus wants to restore both in your life today if you've lost your saltiness. So welcome to our job description. It is clear, it is concise, and it is challenging, right? It's utterly challenging. Jesus has laid out a vision for our lives in our church that we should go after. So let's do it. Let's go after it. The Holy Spirit has been speaking to me in this passage for a while, and this passage, Salt and Light, is going to be our spiritual theme for 2026. We are going to pray for it. We are going to equip for it. We're going to do different weekends to talk more about it, and we are going to celebrate it. We're going to create a little light board, and we're going to light a light every time someone comes to know Jesus or is baptized or does something incredibly amazing to be salt and light in our culture. And today, we're going to do our first two because we're going to have a baptism right here in a moment. And we're going to have our first light. Imagine a whole wall of lights. Imagine a cross full of lights of people's lives who've been touched by you and I because we were salt and light, because we took it seriously. And so today, church, let's do it. Let's get out of the salt shaker and step into the miraculous this Christmas season.